Welcome to another episode of Purpose Today. I'm your host, Dr. April Dobson, and I'm very excited to have a very special guest with us today, Maxine Goldberg. Maxine is a published author and owner of Maxx LLC. You don't want to go anywhere. Stay right there for this power-packed episode. We're going to talk about how you can have talents and gifts that don't go wasted, and you can pivot to align with your purpose professionally and in business efforts. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this sponsorship message. This episode of Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson, Maximizing Gifts and Talents in Purpose, Graceful Pivots, is brought to you by Purpose Today Global in partnership with the Purpose Professionals community. The Purpose Professionals community has moved. To visit the new community, view the link in the chat. If you're interested in joining the Purpose Today Global mailing list, visit purposetoday.com. Welcome back to Purpose Today. I am so very excited to have Maxine Goldberg here on the show. Welcome to Purpose Today, Maxine.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you inviting me. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. And I want us to get started. I know I shared just a little bit about you as we kicked off today, but I know there may be viewers who are wondering about you, wondering about your family. So can you share a little bit about yourself with our viewers?
I'd be happy to. I'm originally from New York City, born and raised, born in Manhattan, raised in the Bronx. They say that when I get upset, sometimes my New York accent comes out, so I start talking like this. But I graduated high school there, and then afterwards, I actually lived overseas for 8 years in the Philippines as a missionary. And then during that time, that is when I went to university and studied business administration, got married, had my 2 wonderful boys out there, and then served as the vice president for administration and finance with my now ex-husband's company, and then came back to the United States in December of 1994. And my 2 boys are now 35 and 33. They're both married. They've blessed me with 5 incredible grandchildren who I love to spend time with. Professionally, I am an accounting manager for a large firm here in Omaha that has national presence, but I'm also the owner of Maxx LLC, and my business helps other business owners to understand their financial, their finances, understanding their bookkeeping, accounting, everything when it comes to their business and just being able to read their finances. I also do QuickBooks training, and I also do business analysis and consulting.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Maxine, for sharing about yourself and your family. That is wonderful that you have 2 beautiful sons and have grandchildren. And so that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I do know that you've had an interesting journey, and you told us a little bit about your time overseas, but you had an interesting journey that inspired you to make a shift and make a pivot professionally. So can you share insight with our viewers regarding your experience?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, that's where I'm going to start because the journey is very long and we only have a limited amount of time. But about 5 years ago, if I can share a quick story, I was reminded of two aunties that I was told about who died in the Holocaust. I come from a Jewish family, and these two aunties perished in the gas chambers. And it was very strange because at the time I was in a job that I didn't like anymore. It was very painful. I was in a very painful marriage at the time as well, a lot of abuse going on. And I could kind of hear what I believe to be God's voice asking me, Maxine, how did your aunties die? And I thought, well, what a stupid question. How did they die? They died in the gas chamber. And then I kept hearing the question over and over. No, how did they die? Why did they die? How did they die? Why did, and I paused and I thought, okay, if the question keeps coming to my mind, there must be something I need to think about. And as I thought about it, I thought, well, beside probably being malnourished, their bodies were healthy. But when they went into this chamber, something changed. And in the chamber, they ended up dying, not because their bodies were not healthy, but because they entered a toxic environment.
Wow.
And the next question in my mind was, where are you? Are you in a chamber? And I thought to myself, well, they died instantly. But I think so many times we keep entering into toxic environments that maybe don't kill us all at one time, but there's so much toxicity that we start to ingest it or absorb it over a long period of time, and it still is capable of killing us. And that's where I was. And that was my real pivot point, because that's the point 5 years ago that I realized if I don't make a shift, I'm going to die. And I knew that personally, I knew that professionally. But it took another 2 years before I could actually make the pivot, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit more then. But that's the time that I really realized that if I don't do something now, I'm going to lose myself. And I didn't know if that meant spiritually die, emotionally die, and physically die. But I knew that that's the path I was headed on, and I needed to make a change.
Wow, you said so many things that we could definitely, unpack. And you talked about having just the revelation of the toxicity. And I think that sometimes, and I know one of the things we're talking about today is gracefully pivoting. Yeah. And you shared that there was still some time, before you made a pivot. And one of the things that you said is that you made a decision. Yes. And I think before we can ever pivot from anything in life, be it a career, be it, in any type of pivot, whatever it is, right? A relocation, anything, we have to make a decision. So it sounds like you had this revelation that helped you, to make the decision. So I want us to talk about what happened between the decision and getting to the pivot. Did you have any challenges that you faced? What helped you to actually start moving from the decision to where you ultimately needed to transition from the toxicity into, what was the right career move for you at that time?
Yes, that's a great question. I think sometimes we become very comfortable in pain. We become comfortable in chaos. And I've realized not only that a pivot was needed, but that I had to take an analysis and an assessment of what was really going on and not be afraid to look in the mirror of my own circumstances. And, there's a big difference between the facts of a matter and the truth of the matter. I had to look at the truth of what was going on and say, is this healthy? Is this portion of my life healthy? Yes, no. And then make those decisions. I had more than one decision to make. That first decision led to other types of decisions. So I started to look at different areas of my life and started to be honest with myself, which I think is sometimes difficult. I think we can see things in other people a lot of times, but then we don't necessarily want to see them in ourselves. And I started to look at the different areas of my life and say, okay, I need to not be so fearful. How do I pivot from this? You know, each area, each thing I was suffering with imposter syndrome, right? And so, but I was suffering from other things as well. I really had a hard time seeing myself right. So some of the steps that I took in those 2 years were, I became an author actually that very same year, because I dove deep into trying to figure out who I was, what it is that I was supposed to do, what was the original intent and design. I feel like with anything, if we can understand what the original design is, right?
Yes.
Then we'll understand what the purpose is. So for me personally, going back to Genesis, going back to, you know, what was the original plan before everything, you know, kind of got messed up, right? And
Right.
diving into that whole idea of who we were supposed to be and getting that identity from my creator. I think that was extremely important, and realizing the way he saw me, the way I was created, and that I needed to start seeing myself that way.
Yes.
And so that was my first aha, right? Like, oh, I was created in the image of a creator. That must mean I have creative powers too, right?
Yes.
And then realizing that if there is an enemy in the world, then he's not trying to make me bad. He's trying to make me feel powerless. If the enemy can make me feel as though I have no power, then he doesn't need to do anything else, right? Because I won't live out my purpose. And so finding out who I was, also going through a whole few months of understanding how to be grateful, being grateful for everything, even the awful things that I had to go through, because through those things, I would never have become the person that I am today. I would never have been so resilient, right? So being grateful. The third thing was forgiveness, right? Learning how to forgive myself for the bad choices maybe that I made that created some of the circumstances I was in, but also forgiving others, you know, and I'm not talking about, you know, allowing them or saying that what they did was correct, right?
Right.
I could even hate what they did as long as I didn't hate them, right? There was a huge difference. So that process of forgiveness, and then learning to love myself, right? It always amazes me. There's a Bible scripture that says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's like, but if I don't know how to love myself, I'm not going to be able to love anybody else, you know? And then pursuing purpose. So it was this step-by-step thing in those 2 years, you know, writing a book, and all the things I wrote in the book, I believed them, but I wasn't quite living it out yet. So it's almost like I was writing it to myself, whether no one else believed it or not, right? I had to keep reading my own book so that I could stay on this path that finally led me to saying, you know what, this is time to pivot. And I will say, Dr. Dobson, you were a huge part of that, because you were one of the few people that saw me, you know, beyond what I could see for myself. You could see things in me that I didn't even believe about myself yet. And you were able to pull those things out of me, plus give me the tools that I needed and the suggestions and the push. Right? And I don't mean push as in pushy, right? But the push that I needed to be able to say, yes, I can do these things. And you were just such a huge blessing to me at the time, because some of the assignments that you gave me, I thought to myself, how in the world? I don't know. And it's so funny because I look back now and I think, of course I could do this. But at the time, that whole imposter syndrome, I could not see myself right. So I'm very grateful to you for stepping in, for being willing to take the time. You were so patient, you're so gracious, and giving me the tools that I needed to be able to do that. And between you and a business coach that I had at the time, my therapist, and the grace of God, I was able to make some really big decisions about my career to get out of an extremely abusive, toxic business setting and walked into this amazing company that actually treated me with the worth that I finally realized that I had. So it was awesome. it was amazing. Yeah, it was crazy because it was one confirmation after the other, and I'm just very, very grateful for the journey.
Well, you said a lot of things that we have to unpack more. And one of the first things that you said that I want us to unpack is going back to Genesis, right? And seeing how we were created. And we were created in the image and likeness of God. We all were, right?
Yes.
And so being able to see and know who we are, know our true identity, know our purpose. There's another scripture that says many are the plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that will prevail. And sometimes we're trying to do something or be someone who doesn't align with who we truly are. So if you could give one tip to someone who's one or two or a few tips to people who may be dealing with imposter syndrome, where do they start? What are some of the things that they need to do to get back to who they were truly created to be?
Yeah. Well, one would be to definitely start reading, right? Genesis 1, to understand who we are. And there are books even, Dr. Martin Williams has some books. Dr. Miles Monroe has some books and there are YouTube channels as well that talk about, the original design of who we are. So that's always a great thing. But at the same time, while you're reading about what the original plan was, what the original intent was of our creation, start asking yourself questions like, when I was little, like, who did I dream of being? What were the dreams that I had when I was a little girl? And when, now as an adult, some of the things I would ask myself was, what makes me angry? Like, when I see something, what makes me really, really angry? And the things that made me angry were signs of things that I was actually called to, but I didn't realize it. The reason it made me so angry is because I was called to solve a problem in that area, in that arena, right? So I think those things, reading, making sure that you are reading things that help you understand who you were actually created to be. And then again, what I mentioned earlier, finding ways to be grateful. And in the book that I wrote, I have like little workbook in the back that has these little gratitude section, where you can talk about and reflect on all the things that you can be grateful for. Find the areas in your life where there's unforgiveness, right? And those are just some of the beginning steps of, getting to a point where you realize that you are way more than what you thought you were. And one other thing, imposter syndrome, it's really important that you surround yourself with people who are not just in your circle, but in your corner. You have to do an assessment of who you're exposing yourself to. And the people I was exposing myself to a lot of them were not people who were in my corner. They were in my circle, but they were part of the people who were instilling beliefs in me that were not true. Oh, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're never going to amount to anything. And I'm talking about even my spouse. I mean, that's hard when you come home to someone who's telling you these things, and you this is supposed to be the person that is doing the opposite, right? Is supposed to be your other half, or your encourager, and they're telling you things that are lies really about yourself. That's really difficult. So making sure that you do an assessment of the people that you're exposing yourself to, and realizing that it matters. When they are making these comments, what are you absorbing? So very important.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those things. I feel like we have so much to unpack, but one of the things that I want to do, because you talked about being able to make a transition. And so after that transition, can you tell us a little bit about the after, right? Because we got a lot of insight on the before. Can you just give us a lot of insight on the after and what that looked like?
Yeah. So after everything changed. It's almost like you have a new prescription for your glasses, right? You go into the eye doctor and all of a sudden your vision is completely different. They give you a new prescription, and then everything you see is completely clear. And I think that's what it felt like for me. Everything I looked at in my life became clear. And there was a joy to that. There was a peace to that. I saw peace settling, as I made very difficult decisions, even in my circles, having to cut certain things off, I won't say cut people off, but create boundaries, healthy boundaries with people. As I started doing these things in my life, because I could see more clearly, right? Then peace started to settle. It started to settle in my personal relationships. It started to settle in my home. It started to settle in how I did my business, in my full-time job, even how I related to my children and my grandchildren. Like, there was a shift in perspective and a shift in clarity. And so even my decision-making process felt clearer. It wasn't cluttered. My home was no longer cluttered. My mind was no longer cluttered. And there wasn't that voice that just kept pulling me back to say, you're not worthy, you're not smart. All of those things had really disappeared. And I saw myself for the person that God made me to be.
That's great. Now, I know you talked about being at a new company after you made the pivot.
Yes.
What was different about your new role at the new company? And was the role that you accepted what you were envisioning, or was there something that was different about what you were envisioning in the pivot?
Well, it's funny because when I first applied for this role, I kept thinking, there's no way they're going to hire me. I remember talking to you about that. And it was so funny because, between your encouragement, and I actually had some friends who were CPAs, and they were like, Maxine, you got this. You know more than you think you know. And I just kept thinking, goodness. And I went through all of the interviews, passed the interviews, but then they had this test. There was an actual timed test. And I don't know about you, but I hate timed tests. I hate them. And there were two parts. There was like a bookkeeping part and an accounting part. And to my surprise, I got like a 99 on the bookkeeping part and like a 90 on the accounting part. And I kept thinking, what is this? But that was like the affirmation and the encouragement that I needed to be like, oh, duh, I'm actually pretty good at this stuff. I can be an accounting manager. I know it sounds crazy now, but so I had a confidence that I did not have at my old jobs. That's number one, because of that crazy test that I didn't want to take, right? It was like proof that I actually knew more than what I thought I knew. And then I had my boss and the people above him. They were just super, super encouraging. It was a completely different environment. You actually had a voice. I was like, what is this? I can actually talk without being shut down, and it was really, I don't know, it was like a revelation to me that even though it was corporate America, they had such a great subculture that they valued intellectual capital. They valued execution. They valued, things like speaking up, and having a backbone. They actually valued these things. Whereas in my former job, that was, you didn't have a voice. It was like, shut up. You do what, if we say jump, you say how high. And it was, that was probably the end, beginning and end of it. But at this new job, it was just such a wonderful opportunity to learn. I realized also how much, how behind I was as far as technology and learning different programs and even jargon, corporate jargon. And quickly, like within 6 months, I was able to obtain more knowledge at this job than I had for 15 years, 16 years at my other job. So that was the biggest difference. Yeah.
Thank you. And I understand in your new role, you were able to also advise. I know you had a lot of, leadership responsibilities, but you also were advising executives and senior leaders in the new opportunity. And I'm only asking about this because as we were going through the coaching, you had shared, these are the types of things that I'd like to be doing. And we talked about some things. So can you just share?
You're pulling this out of me. Okay. So my big dream was never to become an accounting manager. I never even liked numbers that much. And when I was in school, but that's kind of where I was pushed into, my first husband, unfortunately, I wanted to take creative writing and music. And he was like, what the heck are you going to do with that? And he pushed me into business administration. But my real dream, really down inside, I wanted to become an executive coach because I felt like I had been through so much, and I understand the work-life balance really, really well. And I felt like I had so much to give, and I have so much empathy for people and so much love for people. Like I wanted to be able to show leaders, like, here's the way that you can lead and still not lose yourself. You don't have to become a robot. You don't have to become hardened, Anyway, that was the big dream, becoming an executive coach. And yet every opportunity that God was opening up was in this financial role, like, accounting manager, finance, this, that. And I got frustrated. And even after I got this job, even though I was happy, I was frustrated. I remember going to God, I think it was the summer of 2022. And I was like, why do you keep giving me these roles? I want to be an executive coach. And he said, Maxine, who are you talking to every day? And I'm like, well, the CFO, the brand presidents. And, I kind of went on and on. He was like, yeah. And in your business, who do you talk to every day? I said, well, the business owners. And he was like, And he said, you are an executive coach, but you don't have the title. You don't need the title because sometimes executives get intimidated, right? And if you call yourself an executive coach, somebody might say, well, I don't need an executive coach. I don't need but if you're just talking to the accounting manager, you're just talking to the bookkeeping QuickBooks trainer, right? It's almost like a safe title, and you start talking, and then one thing leads to another, and we talk about business principles. We start talking about business strategies, and all of a sudden there's a relationship between that and maybe something you did over the weekend. And, and like all of a sudden we start talking about things that are maybe personal attributes or things that need to change here. Maybe there's a mindset that they have that's not healthy, a heart posture that's not healthy. And you're able to slowly kind of, pull that out and help them to realize that there's a similarity here. Like, because this is happening, then this has happened in your business life. And I've had executives crying at my desk and not even understanding why, like, oh, why am I crying? And it's because, I feel like God has given me a gift to be able to create a safe space for people to not only be financially naked, if you will, in front of me, but to be emotionally vulnerable, and there's just no judgment there, because we all have those moments. And I don't care if you're the president of a large corporation, or if you're an employee for a small business. I mean, the one thing that's the same in all of us is that we have these areas of our lives that cross over into each other. And you can never tell me that what is happening in your heart and mind does not translate to what you're doing in your business and in your job. It just there's always a connection. And we find out that connection, right? And find out, oh, if I seek help over here in my personal life, this actually is going to translate beautifully into my business life, and yeah.
Right.
So,
I want to highlight something that you said, and it's something that is so true that I keep trying to tell people. It's not about the title.
No.
And so, for people who are watching, I want you to just take out a paper and pen or something that you can take notes with if you already don't have something out, and write down that one thing that you've been dreaming about, the one thing that you've been desiring to do that you haven't done, because chances are that aligns with your purpose and what you should be doing. And it's not about the title. I've said it before, write down a list of tasks. And I know I had you do this and you were like, what? But write down a list of tasks you can enjoy doing every day, even if you didn't get paid for it. And it's not saying that you should work without pay, but it's about finding out the things that truly, truly align with what you've been purposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And with your desires. And
Yeah.
And
the desires that you just have abandoned, the things that you keep saying, oh, I'll do that later, it's not the right time. You give yourself these excuses, but you need to do it now. I love the story that you told in the beginning, Maxine, and it's unfortunate that there are so many people who had that, experience that your aunts had. But when we are in an environment that is toxic and we continue to be exposed to it, it's not good, mentally, it's not good physically. It's not even, good from a spiritual standpoint. Yeah. We're supposed to prosper and be in health even as our soul prospers. Mm-hmm. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And so writing down those things and then taking action, the action that you can take today to get you closer and move you to that. And sometimes it's not even going to another company. Sometimes within where you are, you can actually make a pivot. If you're a business owner who's doing something that doesn't align, there's things that you can change within your business, or there's pivots that you can make from a business standpoint. So thank you so much, Maxine, for that. I know that I feel like there is so much that we could talk about, and I'm sure, I'm going to have you to come back, but I want to pivot and talk about your book. You mentioned a little bit earlier about your book and how you even had space for people to write the things that they were grateful about and to show their gratitude. And I believe it's good for us to always, even in the moments that are not desirable, find things that we can be grateful for, to express our gratitude and express how we're thankful. So can you talk a little bit more about your book? Tell the audience the title of the book, what would benefit them by reading the book, and how they can find it if they want to purchase it.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, I wrote it 5 years ago. And by the way, I want to just say a quick comment. When I talked about gratitude, there's a scripture that says to be grateful in all things. That doesn't mean we have to be grateful for all things. Having gratitude in a circumstance doesn't mean, like, my sister is going through bone cancer right now. I'm not grateful for the bone cancer. Like, I'm not grateful for that. I'm grateful in all things. I'm not grateful for what she's going through. Same thing with myself. I'm not necessarily grateful for some of the things that I go through, but I'm grateful while I'm going through things. I still have an attitude of gratitude. So, yes, thank you. My book is called Restored to Reign: From the Ruins of Our Story to the Throne of Our Rightful Power. So I have a copy here. And I did run two runs of this book that actually sold out. So I only have about 3 more copies physically, but on Amazon you can order this, and that they have unlimited, of course, copies that they can create for you. So this book it's just a small book that I wrote in 2020. It's under Maxine Dancer because that was my former name at the time. But it gives you the opportunity to discover some of the answers to those 5 questions about, where are you from? Where are you going? Who are you? What can you do? Why are you here? And it just has those first steps, if you will, for getting from the chaos and the ruins of what you're looking at right now in your life to restoration. And sometimes I think what happens is that we listen to inspirational speakers and we're like, oh, that sounds great. And then we go back home and it's like, wait, how do I do that now? Like, what's the step? So these are just very practical steps. It gives you step-by-step answers for how to get from chaos, right, to restoration. And yeah, just really a simple book. So I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Maxine. And how do they order it?
So they will have to order it through Amazon at this point, because as I said, I have not done a new run with my new name. I haven't done an update to the book at this point, so I don't have a new run for it on my website, but they can order it through Amazon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we talked a little bit about Maxx LLC earlier, and I know you've helped countless entrepreneurs and leaders, organizational leaders, to ensure that their business and their companies remain compliant, that they identify different cost savings, and that they have successful bookkeeping. So can you share more with our audience on Maxx LLC and how you help clients and leaders?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Well, I've got a couple of friends who identify themselves as professional disruptors, right? They come into businesses and they shake things up and they figure like, you got to change this, you got to do that. I'm not that person. If I had to classify myself, I would say I'm a professional stabilizer. So once a disruptor comes in and shakes everything up, well, if you keep shaking stuff up, it'll just become chaos, right? You need someone to come in there and stabilize it. And so that is kind of my role. And what I love about what I do is that I get to create those aha moments for business owners. And they're not always pretty, right? They're not always pretty. However, I love what I do because I'm able to help business owners see, like if they already have an established business, for example, right? I can come in, I can do an analysis, I can show them, where their books maybe have some errors or where we need to fix something, and then how to do it, right? We clean it all up and then get them moving and on their way. And it's really, really exciting when they start seeing, I can actually use the information. If I'm doing it correctly, I can use that information to make big business decisions, better business decisions for my future. So that's really exciting. For business owners who are just starting, maybe they just opened a business and they don't even know like what is a balance sheet? What is a profit and loss? I don't even know what that means, all these technical terms. And sometimes they think, well, I don't need to know that. I'll just let my CPA do it. No, right? Your CPA, we love CPAs, we need CPAs, but their function is to file your taxes. They're not there to help train you to understand your books. And if you are a business owner and you don't understand your books, I just did a little commercial for my business. And one of the things I said is that 85% of all failed businesses say that one of the reasons that their businesses failed is because they didn't understand, right, how to read their own finances. So for me, it's just equipping, empowering that business owner to be able to understand what their books actually mean, how to make sure that things are being done correctly. And like you said, in compliance with state, federal, with generally accepted accounting principles and all of the above. But then I make it fun for them. Who likes accounting and bookkeeping? Like nobody, right? Nobody got into business except if they're accountants or bookkeepers. Nobody got in business because they love that side of it, but it is that side of it that could bring them to their knees and ultimately take their business out, right? And it's my job to be able to help you understand that side of your business in a fun way. I make sure I do it so that I'm using analogies that you will understand. I break it down and I make it fun. And because of that, then they're able to actually get their business moving and be able to grow their business and scale their business and be able to understand it. And I feel great because I feel like I'm the quiet, unseen person behind these successful businesses. And I get to kind of like fade off into the sunset, right? While they're like, it's kind of like teaching your child to ride a bike, right? You teach them to ride and then they're off and then you're like, yay, okay, bye-bye. Just call me if you fall down and hurt your knee, and you kind of fade off into the sunset. But I feel like, I get to have a part of that successful business, even if it's not broadcast. Like it's really fun. Yeah, it's fun.
That's good. So if someone's watching and, they're a leader in their organization, they're a business owner, and they want to start the process and inquire more about Quick Maxx LLC services, where would they start?
They would absolutely start with my website, which is quickmaxx.biz. So Quick Maxx has 2 X's, .biz, B-I-Z, and just register for a free 30-minute consultation. I make sure that everybody does that free consultation, 1, to see what it is that the business owner really needs, 2, to make sure that I'm the person that can actually help them, right? And 3, to just find out what it is that they're passionate about, because it may be that, what they need is maybe not something that I offer, but I might know somebody that can help them. So yeah, that's all they need to do.
That's great. Now, I know that, we talked about a lot of things today, and it's been such a joy talking with you today. Thank you again for being a guest on Purpose today. Is there anything else about you, about Quick Maxx LLC, your book, or anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to share with our viewers today?
Yeah, I think if I had to say anything, I would say, I really believe in divine appointments, and that might sound kind of corny, but if you're watching today and you just happen to be listening to this, then this was for you. And I just want to encourage you, because when you have limiting beliefs about yourself, that really interferes with the alignment of your purpose. And so if you're listening to this today and you want to step out of the boat and walk on the water of your life's oceans, this is your sign. If you've been waiting for a sign, this was the sign.
That's good. Thank you, Maxine. And if any of the viewers want to contact you or keep in touch, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yes, certainly email Maxine at quickmaxx.biz. They can reach out via LinkedIn and send me a message that way. But yes, either way would be great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Maxine. It's been such a joy to have you as a guest on Purpose today. I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about, but we do have to be mindful of the time. So thank you to all of the guests, for watching. If there was anyone who was engaging and you had a question and we didn't have an opportunity to answer it, please feel free to leave those questions in the comments. We'll do our best. If we don't have an opportunity to answer it, connect with Maxine, send her an email, reach out to her on LinkedIn, her website, email address, LinkedIn, that's on the screen again. So thank you to all the viewers for watching. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you again, Maxine, for being a guest on Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson. It's been such a pleasure to have you as a guest on Purpose Today. Stay tuned for another episode of Purpose Today. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. If there's anything that was valuable for you today on today's show, just drop it in the chat. Drop what you appreciated about today's episode and hit the subscribe button. That way you get the notifications of any future episodes. And until our next episode of Purpose Today, stay purposed today and every day. And thank you so much again for viewing Purpose Today. And Maxine will chat backstage.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you again for all of our viewers for watching.